Good morning. How is everybody today? Good. My name is Bruce Jacobs, and I am the CFC Director for the Intermountain Combined Federal Campaign. And if you don't know where that is, we cover all of the state of Utah, a third of the state of Colorado, almost all of Wyoming, most of Idaho except the Panhandle, and one county in Oregon. So we're kind of a unique campaign. I've been the CFC director. I don't know what that noise was. Sorry. I've been the CFC director at Intermountain for going on to my 9th campaign now. I'm not sure that I should be the one up here, but I got the call, so here I am. This is CFC 101, and it is for LFCC members and PCFO directors with less than 2 years of experience. Does anyone out there have more than 2 years experience in the CFC? Raise your hand. 2, 3. Okay, get up here, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm done.
No, but please feel free to chime in, because this is CFC 101. It is not CFC 201 or 301 or 401. We cannot possibly cover everything that there is to know about how to run a CFC in the time that we've been given here. So our goal here is to kind of provide you with the skeleton, with the bare bones of walking you through a campaign cycle and everything that is your responsibility as either an LFCC member or a PCFO director or assistant. But then the rest of the conference will be to put the meat on that skeleton, to really fill in the details and help make sense of it all. We had a video I wanted to show you, but unfortunately it's an internet thing, and we don't have internet here on this computer. But if you get the opportunity back in your hotel room or later on, I encourage you to go to YouTube and just do a search for CFC More Than a Bill. And there's about a 7-minute video from a couple of years ago that does a really good job, I think, of kind of explaining how the campaign operates. And it sort of takes you through the life of a CFC dollar being pledged through the campaign and the hands that it passes through and how it works. So I'd encourage you to do that. I'm joined today by Kathleen Hansen, who is the Executive Director of the Federal Executive Board in Los Angeles, and she has many years of experience serving on the LFCC in her area, and I'll let her tell you how many. And encourage you to either write down your questions, but we do want to make this interactive. So if you have questions at any point during the presentation, raise your hand, or if we don't see you, jump up and down and holler or whatever. And make sure, please, as Pam said, that you come to one of these 2 microphones here and speak into the mic so that the audience watching later on understands your question. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to turn the time over to Catherine to get us started.
Thank you, Bruce. And having worked with him on this presentation, I know why he's up here. He's very good at what he does. So we are in good hands today. Just by show of hands, how many of you are PCFOs? Okay, so the rest are LFCCs. So great, thank you. Again, as Bruce said, my name is Kathleen Hansen, and one of the things I've found is that a lot of people don't know what a Federal Executive Board is. So before I get into the rest of the agenda, I just want to briefly explain to you that Federal Executive Boards actually have a lot in common with the Combined Federal Campaign. We were both started in 1961 by President Kennedy, and the Federal Executive Boards are 28 nationwide, and we have a discrete geographic area. So in the Los Angeles area, I cover the 7 counties that make up the greater Los Angeles area. And there are a couple of statewide campaigns. Colorado has, or Federal Executive Boards. Colorado statewide, Oklahoma statewide, Minnesota is statewide. But there's a number of campaigns that don't have an FEB that's in your territory. And so although there's a symbiotic relationship between the FEBs and the Combined Federal Campaign, it's not an essential relationship. So if you don't have a federal executive board, I encourage you to look at the one nearest you and see if, maybe they can help you. I know even though Fresno's not in my area, I go up and work with Susan sometimes on the Central California campaign. And so it's in our best interest for the campaigns to succeed. So although they're not necessarily our responsibility in the areas where there is no FEB, we are there to help. So if you want to learn more about federal executive boards, feb.gov will tell you everything you want to know, and also list where the 28 are located. I also wanted to tell you that Bruce was very modest when he mentioned the YouTube video, More Than a Bill. He actually was very instrumental in designing it, and it's a great video, and I'm sorry we couldn't show it to you, so definitely check that out the next time you get on the internet. Also, as Bruce said, we want to make this very interactive, and I know when I have a question or I don't understand something, I sort of obsess on that until I get a chance to ask the question. So to free your mind up, at any time, if we're not clear, if we're using an acronym, feel free to jump to the microphone. If we see you standing there, we'll pause and take your question. So today our goal is to go over the history and benefits of the combined federal campaign, the structure, the responsibilities, differentiate the roles and responsibilities between the principal campaign fund organization, hereinafter referred to as PCFO, and the local federal coordinating council, the oversight and accountability. And Bruce will spend a fair amount of time on the calendar, and then we'll share some best practices, as well as we want to hear from you, maybe some of the best practices you've seen or heard of, especially those of you that have been around long enough to probably do this presentation yourself. So feel free to share. And here's the clicker. So as I mentioned, the combined federal campaign was started in 1961, and Bruce gave me the privilege of telling you how long I've been involved with the CFC, and I've got 27 years of federal service, and I started giving to the CFC from the very beginning. I've served as every role possible: key worker, coordinator, loan executive. I've reviewed applications. I've sat on the LFCC. I've facilitated 5 or 6 mergers between campaigns. And so I've seen a lot of the CFC from a lot of different perspectives. I'm also old enough that when I first came into the workforce, I had some coworkers that were around before the combined federal campaign. And one of the things they talked about is it was sort of like the wild, wild west, in that, every day there was a different person at the door saying, "Hi, we're here. Can we ask your employees to give us money?" And so part of why the combined federal campaign was created was to reduce the interruptions in the workforce and really create a combined federal campaign where there would be just one period of time where employees would be asked to give money. And it is the only authorized workplace giving campaign. We struggle with a few agencies have their own little pet charities, and you'll see the little cans or something where they're collecting money outside of the campaign cycle, and that is not allowed by the regulations. Although it does go on, we really discourage it. One of the things that we do is we tell the agencies, if you've got a pet charity and it's not participating with the CFC, rather than running a parallel workplace campaign, you need to get that group in your charity, in the combined federal campaign. And so we are always inviting employees to encourage charities that they're passionate about to get involved in the combined federal campaign to reduce the duplication and demand on the employees. Since its creation, the combined federal campaign has raised $7 billion, and I am very proud of that number, especially when you realize that 100% of that comes from employees' pockets. And when I go to other workplace giving award ceremonies and you hear the numbers that different private sector organizations collect, that number is usually matched by the private sector organization. So 100% of that $7 billion came from the generosity of our federal employees, and that's something to be very proud of. Since this slide was made, we actually had a merger approved in California last Friday, so we have 162 local campaigns, not 163. And now I'm going to turn it over to Bruce to talk about the benefits of the combined federal campaign.
All right. With the CFC, I like to talk about the 4 C's, and you see them up here on your slides. The benefits of the campaign, and the first of those C's is confidence. And sharing with you today is mostly from a federal employee's perspective, but of course there are great benefits to participating in the campaign from a charity's perspective. But since you will be spending most of your time talking to federal employees about the benefits of the CFC, that's kind of the angle we're taking on this. First of all, every nonprofit in the combined federal campaign has to apply annually. At least currently that's the case. And what that does is ensure that they are consistently meeting the requirements for eligibility. So as a donor, you know that every single charity in the book is vetted every single year by a committee of federal employee volunteers to ensure that that charity is meeting the standards of the CFC. And if you're familiar at all with the application process, you know that those standards are fairly rigorous. Every CFC campaign is audited on an annual basis, or in other words, an independent certified public accountant comes into each local CFC, and OPM provides to them an agreed upon procedures list, an AUP. They have to go through that, and they're checking to make sure that pledges are being accounted for properly, that they're being entered into the database properly and consistently, and they're checking to make sure that those designations made by you, the federal employee, or your donors, are being honored properly. So there's another high degree of confidence for you as a federal donor, knowing that the money that you're pledging is getting to the organization that you're pledging to. Every campaign reports to an LFCC. Many of you are on that LFCC here today. And there's oversight. The LFCC sets the budget for each campaign. They review the PCFO for compliance to make sure that the PCFO is acting in accordance with regulation and following those rules and procedures. The LFCC is instrumental in reviewing each and every charity to make sure that those charities are indeed eligible to participate, and that they one of those checks that then is taken to the OPM level is to ensure that every charity on that list is a 501c3, an active, valid 501c3 on the current IRS, business master file. So there's that check to make sure. So the LFCC is responsible for reviewing and approving the goals set by the campaign, and then at the end of the campaign, they're evaluating the campaign on its effectiveness. They also participate in many instances in the running of the campaign, helping with CEO calls and other duties, as assigned. So finally, the donor information is highly safeguarded in the CFC. So there are only certain things that we can do with that donor information, and it's tightly controlled. We never release a donor's name and contact information for any reason unless that donor specifies explicitly on the pledge form that, yes, you may release my name. And there's a lot of control there. They can say, release my name only, or go ahead and release my name and contact information, and even a box to say whether or not we tell the charities the amount that that donor has given. So much confidence, I believe, with the CFC, and it's a great benefit of participating in the campaign. Another great benefit is choice. As a donor in the CFC, as a federal employee, you decide where your money is going to go. Depending on the campaign you're participating in, in our campaign, there's over 3,000 choices, between the national, international list, and then 700 plus local organizations to choose from. So just about any cause, just about any specific charity or passion, interest that you have as a federal employee, you're going to find it in the CFC. I've had key workers who have issued a challenge to their workforce to say, you think of a topic And if I can't find an organization in the CFC that matches the topic that you're interested in, I will donate $50 to any other charity of your choice. And this key worker has never lost that bet. Somebody said to him once, "Oh, dirt! You find me a CFC organization that has to do with dirt." He found like 4 or 5 with soil conservation, So there's just almost nothing you can think of that isn't in the CFC. So there's so many options and so many choices there. Again, as a donor, you choose exactly how much information you want released, or no information at all. I think a majority of our donors prefer to remain anonymous, and that can be a selling point to you in the campaign. If you're giving outside of the CFC, you don't have that same level of control. They're going to get your information. So it's all up to you. And then the future of giving is coming. We've been piloting in the CFC universal giving. If you don't know what that is, that means that if you are from, I use the example, like if you grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and there's a local children's hospital there. I'm not from Charlotte, so I'm making this up. But and now you're stationed in Los Angeles for your federal assignment, whether it's DOD or whatever. You may want to give back to that local children's hospital in Charlotte, but you can't currently because you're restricted to either giving to national, international organizations, which are the same for every campaign, or your local list of charities. Well, this universal giving opens it up so that as a donor, you can pick any local charity, no matter which campaign that local charity happens to reside in. So that's, I don't know, OPM may be making an announcement, but they've been piloting it for 2 years now. And so whether it's in pilot for 1 more year, I don't know, but it's coming. And that's a good thing. Also, with new proposed regulations, we're going to see the day soon when any employee can give as soon as they enter federal service, which is also a good thing. So rather than having to wait until September, if you're hired in January, you'll have the opportunity to be introduced to the CFC and to give right away. So there's some cool things coming down the pike as well. And then finally, not finally, there's 2 more, aren't there? CFC is so convenient. There's so much convenience with the combined federal campaign, and I think payroll deduction, in my mind, is still the best way to give. And I always, when I'm giving a spiel at a federal agency to help introduce the campaign, I use myself as an example, because if any one of you were to approach me right now and say, "Bruce, can you cough up $50 for my pet organization that needs it?" I'm going to open up my wallet and show you that there's not much in there, because there's not. But even though I'm not a federal employee, I happen to give through my workplace campaign at United Way, and I give by payroll deduction. And I give to the organizations that are near and dear to my heart. And through payroll deduction, I can specify, a certain number of dollars per paycheck, and over the course of the year, that is adding up to much, much, much more than $50. It really adds up to a significant contribution to the charities of my choice. And I never miss it. It comes out, I don't think about it. And because it's a workplace campaign, thankfully, somebody's there to remind me once a year that it's time to re-up that donation. And we're human beings here. So that's another benefit of the CFC, is it's an annual ask. To me, it's just an annual reminder that it's time to give. And hopefully that becomes, part of your DNA. With electronic pledging now, there's even more convenience and more choice. So you can give by payroll deduction, you can give a one-time cash check or credit card gift, and there's some campaigns that I think have bank allotment opportunities, and I think that some campaigns are piloting even recurring credit card transactions, and so that might be coming in the future to more campaigns. But there's just so many opportunities, and electronic giving makes it really easy to search and find the charity that you're looking for, to quickly sign up for payroll deduction. And then finally, there's the camaraderie of the CFC. Let's not forget the benefit of pooling our resources together, coming together in the workplace for a good cause. I know it, even though I'm not a federal employee, again, at my workplace, we do an annual, even though it's when you work for United Way, obviously you're going to be giving, but we come together and we still have the fun activities, and we did the wheelchair races this year, and we did pie eating contest, and we did bake sales, and this is like a 10-person office, but we had a ball all week long, and we raised a lot of money. And that's not to be overlooked, I think. The camaraderie of giving together. I believe that giving together is a better experience than giving alone. I think Catherine has some comments to share from a federal
actually,
perspective.
you said that very well. I don't know how many of you have met our CFC director is Demetrius Stevenson, and he always talks about the CFC experience, and that's part of what we bring to the federal agencies. And in case you haven't heard, there's kind of low morale in the federal workforce right now. We had a tough year. And the Office of Personnel Management has launched a employee engagement initiative. They're feeling that that's the #1 way that they can retain high-caliber federal employees. And I see in the workplace the CFC initiatives really help bond, and it gets young people interested. The fun things like the wheelchair games and pie eating contest make it fun to give, and really helps boost morale. And we just had our CFC Awards program last week, and the enthusiasm and excitement and the employees just feeling really. I mean, we were at 86% of our goal, so it's a little less than we had hoped for, but there were still a few campaigns in there that exceeded last year's goal, which was remarkable, and they were so proud of that. And they did things like, put on capes, and they were, the super CFC heroes, and, going door to door and, calling people and helping them through the MyPay, and just the passion with which they gave. And then once they accomplished the goal, or even, just the amount they were able to give, went a long way to kind of rebuilding the morale in the workplace. So that is definitely, I think, a real advantage of the Combined Federal Campaign is it's an opportunity to come together and give together and accomplish something good together. And we don't always get to do that in the federal workforce. So that's, I think, an important C.
Again, these were all benefits of the CFC from the federal employees' perspective. There's certainly benefits to participating in the CFC as a charity. If you can imagine, how many federal employees are there in the nation, Curtis? 4 million plus or so? Okay, almost 5 million federal employees. So as just say a national charity, can you imagine the time, effort, and resources that would be required to try to reach out to 5 million federal employees? Well, you can't, of course, because it's against the regulations, but if there were no CFC, can you imagine the effort and the time and money required to undertake that? But for free, essentially, because you apply for free, and as soon as you're accepted into the campaign, now you have access to those 5 million federal employees. And it saves them time, money, and effort because they're able to now participate in this campaign. Federal employees are free to donate to them, and that has a reduction on their own overhead costs. So what a benefit to the charities. Also, payroll deduction is a benefit to them as well, and I'm a perfect example. If they were to ask me for money, I might be able to give them a $10 gift or so, but through payroll deduction, if they convince me that they're a worthy cause, I might be able to give $10 a paycheck. Suddenly I'm giving them $260 and not $10. So that's not to be overlooked from the charity perspective. For those of you with fundraising experience, let me open it up. Does anybody have any other great benefits that we may be overlooking here that you use to sell the campaign to your federal employees?
And they don't have to start with a C, so you
can. Sorry, if they don't start with a C, you can sit back down.
We don't want to hear about them.
I know you have them. You're just too shy to share at the moment. Okay. Well, just want you to know you're free to speak up at any time. Okay. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the structure of the campaign. So OPM, in case you don't know, stands for the Office of Personnel Management in Washington, and OPM oversees the campaign nationwide. They set the policy, the procedures. They're in charge of the regulations, and also not just the regulations, but they issue guidance and memorandum from time to time that are key and important and instrumental in the way we operate the campaign. So OPM has the director of OPM has the final say, and they're the ones that are tasked with overseeing the campaign. But at the local level, each campaign, all 162 now, have a local federal coordinating committee, as you know, that serves as sort of the executive board of the local CFC. And they are the body that is responsible for setting the budget, for approving campaign plans and marketing outreach, and overseeing the PCFO in the day-to-day operations of the campaign. So they are the local bosses of the CFC. And then there's the Principal Combined Fund Organization, which is the nonprofit organization tasked with training federal employee volunteers, with receiving pledges, tracking the donor database, and making sure that incoming money from the campaign, especially payroll deduction, is being then dispersed to the charities and honored according to the designations of the federal employee. And the PCFO wears many hats in terms of the people that it deals with. So we're interacting with the local federal agencies that are running the campaigns. We're interacting with all of the campaign team, the loaned executives who are on loan from the federal government to help run the campaign, with the coordinators and key workers that are in the trenches making the ask in the federal environment, and also interfacing with the local and national and international nonprofit organizations that apply to the campaign. And of course, the LFCC is, you see all these dotted lines up there but there's so much interplay and interaction between the LFCC and the PCFO with all of those groups that the campaign is dependent on. At the end of the day, though, that yellow bubble, it really is all about the charities. We're here to raise the money for nonprofit organizations that exist to make our communities a better place to live. Are there any questions on the structure of the CFC before we move on? Okay.
So it looks like alphabet soup when you look at that last slide, and so we're going to break down each of the modules and go into more detail about what that role is. So the Office of Personnel Management does not stand, or OPM does not stand for other people's money. It stands for the Office of Personnel Management. And I see we have Curtis Rumba in the audience, so wave Curtis in case they haven't met you. The CFC staff are just great. They work tirelessly on so many behind-the-scenes activities and very demanding ways to make sure that the CFC maintains its integrity, and they're always super responsive, very hardworking, especially with the time change. And Mary Capulli is my point of contact, and regardless of when I send a message, within minutes I get a reply. We'll be in the middle of an LFCC meeting, and somebody will say, well, what does OPM think about that? I'm like, I don't know, let's ask. And I'll send Mary an email, and before the end of the meeting, I've got the answer. So they're a great resource, and they work very, very hard, and they really believe in the Combined Federal Campaign, and have a lot of specific oversight requirements that we all need to make sure that we follow. They are the holders of the regulations that oversee the Combined Federal Campaign, which is the 5, and the CFR stands for Code of Federal Regulations. And you can get a copy of those if you haven't seen them already. And definitely take a few minutes to review them and make sure that you're always working within the confines of the regulations. and that'll keep us all out of trouble, which is a good thing. OPM establishes the annual timelines, and they are responsible for the national list, the international list. They also approve any local, they're the final arbiter on any local denials. So if you deny a charity application, it'll go to OPM for a review, and they ultimately decide whether the charity is in or out. They will, they're the owners of the Employee Express, and I see at this workshop there's a breakout session on MyPay, and MyPay is basically the Department of Defense equivalent of Employee Express. So if you have a predominantly DoD campaign, that's definitely a workshop you might want to go to. They also were responsible several years ago when we went to the 5-digit code, and that was a really labor-intensive activity. And that was ultimately for this goal of getting to universal giving, which Bruce talked about, because unless every charity had a unique code, we couldn't do universal giving. So they are very busy but very helpful, and ultimately they are responsible for the integrity of the campaign. They take that very seriously. So the local federal coordinating council is where I spend most of my activity with the combined federal campaign. And one of the things that I hear repeatedly is, oh, I thought it was a United Way campaign, or I thought it was a community health charity campaign, or whoever the PCFO is. And the LFCC is responsible for making sure that you all remember this is a federal employee campaign. It is managed by federal employees, it is overseen by federal employees, and we, through the wonderful assistance of people like Bruce, we have combined principal campaign fund organizations, PCFOs, that do a lot of the heavy lifting, and we honestly could not imagine doing it without them. But ultimately, it is the federal employees' responsibility to make sure that the campaign complies with the regulations and the requirements set forth by the Office of Personnel Management. So the local federal coordinating council, they make the decisions, they approve the budget, they enter into the memorandum of agreement with the PCFO, and that can be for 1 year with the option of renewing up to 3 years. And they hire the principal campaign fund organization, and then ultimately that organization manages the day-to-day operations of the campaign throughout the tenure of the life cycle of the bill, using Bruce's video metaphor. And and they supervise the PCFO. So, but that's really an important point, is that it is a federal employee campaign. I remember sitting at a kickoff at an Air Force base, and the general gets up there and said, "So we're here for the United Way campaign," and I'm like, "No, it's the combined federal campaign." And so I just cannot tell you how much that irritates me. So no matter what, it's a federal employee campaign, and that's really where the focus needs to be, is on the federal employees. So the local federal coordinating council, the size is not dictated by the regulations, but their responsibilities are very heavily dictated by the regulations. And it's the local federal coordinating council's responsibility to make sure the campaign is effectively administered in all of the agencies in the CFC area, which I don't even know how Bruce does his territory. It's huge. But there's this idea that the local federal coordinating council has all the time in the world to oversee the campaign, and the reality is it's a collateral duty for most of those federal employees that are on the local federal coordinating council. So they have a very demanding day job, and in this environment of downsizing, they're probably doing 3 or 4 people's job, and they're giving of their time to serve on the local federal coordinating council. So it's hard for them to spend a lot of time on the campaign. And I know PCFOs get frustrated because their LFCCs maybe aren't as responsive, or maybe aren't spending as much time on the campaign as they'd like. And so, the PCFO can help this process by, working with alternate mediums for the meetings. Maybe use a go-to-meeting, have call-in options. Sending out a list of decision points that need to be made so the meetings can be run very efficiently. And just really guiding and shaping the agenda to make sure that the executive's time is used very efficiently. Because when we see LFCC burnout, it's usually because the meetings are just rambling and we're just not really focused. And so the better the PCFO is at helping the LFCCs focus and use their time efficiently, the more responsive the LFCC will be. But they are very busy individuals. And as I mentioned earlier, federal executive boards can help campaigns recruit LFCC members. And then I think the very next session today is the regional breakouts. And that's my favorite part of this workshop. That's when you meet the campaigns that are adjacent to you. And there's multiple opportunities for collaborating, both at the LFCC level and at the PCFO level. And one of the things that we do, and I think it's kind of a segue into our next slide, is we'll use LFCCs from one campaign to sort of leverage cooperation for federal agencies in the adjacent campaign. So for instance, in Los Angeles, a lot of people in Ventura County reported to LA County, and the Ventura County was maybe struggling with getting some LFCC members. So I reached out to all of my LA members, the federal agency heads, and said, I know you all supervise people in Ventura. You're supportive of the CFC. We need you to help us get the other federal employees in the adjacent county supportive. So really talk to your adjacent campaigns, because you share information in the booklet, but throughout the year you can leverage those relationships to help get access to other federal employees and federal agencies. And again, if you don't have a federal executive board, the nearest one may have some contacts for you, or there's these things called federal executive associations, which also have a good list of federal agency heads in the area. The principal distinction between a federal executive board and a federal executive association is that a board has permanent staff like myself, and with the federal executive association, again, it's a collateral duty, and so they sometimes aren't as able to keep as many things on their plate as a federal executive board is. The federal agency heads are required to have a opportunity for their employees to contribute to the combined federal, or to have a campaign in their workplace. And so you'll get federal agency heads sometimes to say like, oh, we don't do that here. No, they have to do that here. They have to provide an opportunity for their employees to hear about the combined federal campaign. And you just need to find a way to make it easier for them, whether that's a 5-minute stand-up at an all-hands meeting. Maybe they aren't willing to do a kickoff, but they are required to give their employees an opportunity to hear about the combined federal campaign. And you can gently remind them that that is a requirement of their position. The other thing that is a very useful competition or peer-to-peer networking, we do agency head visits where we'll get like agencies to visit a similar agency, and so that it's not the PCFO or it's not somebody like myself going in and telling them that the CFC is a wonderful thing and they should get involved. But when their peer says, we participate in the CFC and here's the advantages for our employees, that sometimes will go a long way to getting maybe a reticent federal agency head on board. And so with our LFCC, we'll divide up the list of low-performing campaigns that we feel like need a little nudge, and everybody on the LFCC agrees to do 3 to 5 visits, and our PCFO gives us data sheets. So we have a 1-page data sheet where we can show them the trend, whether they're going up or down, or statistics regarding where they fall with regard to like-size campaigns. And I personally have seen a number of those CEO visits or agency head visits really turn a campaign around, because when you show the special agent in charge of ICE or FBI that, of all the federal law enforcement, you're at the bottom. Oh, they don't want to see that. So, you don't do public shaming, but when you're one-on-one in their office, you can go, you're not doing very well. And, we'd really like to turn that around. And we have awards for the most improved campaign. And then it seems like once they get the most improved campaign award, the very next year they're rocking it and they're doing a really good campaign. So those one-on-one visits are really good use of time. But it really requires, again, the PCFO providing the data to the LFCC member to go do these visits. Because if you do the visits without data, you're not going to be very effective. And the LFCC members don't really have the time to pull the data and don't have access to the databases. So that's part of this wonderful collaboration between PCFOs and LFCCs that really make it all work. Public recognition is very important. And that's getting harder and harder to do in big campaigns like Bruce's. It's hard to have a big awards ceremony, or just with the budget situation and not being able to provide food at events. But there's a lot of ways to do public recognition, and Bruce will talk a little bit later about social media. And I know we just had our awards ceremony at a theater, and so the concession stand opened up, and so we were able to, they were able to buy their own refreshments. And we had a red carpet, and then on the marquee it said the CFC raised, $3.7 million, and then we had like fake paparazzi, when people were coming down the red carpet, kind of an LA thing, but it was. But what we did is we had all the charities taking pictures, and then we asked the charities to repost on their websites or their Facebook pages, and so we tried to force multiply getting the word out there and getting some public recognition. So, if you think creatively, there's a lot of ways to do public recognition, and so everybody that drove by that street saw federal employees donated, and we didn't put CFC because not everybody knows what that is. We put federal employees donated, $3.7 million, and hopefully a few people saw that and thought, wow, I didn't know federal employees were nice. I thought, who knew? So there's a lot of opportunities for public recognition, and that is, I'm now going to turn it over to Bruce to talk about the PCFO and the heavy lifting that you all do to make us all look good. So thank you.
I think federal employees are nice.
Thank you.
In fact, I have a really large IRS right in our town in Ogden, Utah, and I come to their defense frequently when people are bashing the IRS, because they happen to be some of the most generous and giving of all of our federal employees in the area. So I'm maybe the only person in America who loves the IRS. The PCFO, and it was funny earlier when you raised your hand to say if you were a PCFO or LFCC. Where are the PCFOs again? Yeah, it's like they're like skewed to this side of the room. So you need to go sit over there. Sorry. So I'm here to talk to you for a minute. We're kind of the boots on the ground, the day-to-day operations of the day-to-day. The daily operations of the CFC. But what we're doing on a day-to-day basis really varies depending on what time of year. So somebody will ask me, what do you do every day, Bruce? I'm like, well, let's see, it's February. I'm busy collecting applications from nonprofits that are interested in applying for the CFC. But if you were to ask me, in August, my daily routine is far different. So we are going to go through the calendar a little bit later on, but in general, on this slide here is a quick short list of things that you're responsible for doing. First of all, you report to the LFCC, the Local Federal Coordinating Committee, and that is not to be overlooked. They are the people in charge. So lest you forget, you're not the boss. You are there to report to the LFCC and to do their bidding. Their bidding is usually kind and good. But you're doing the daily work. So this time of year, you are facilitating the annual application review. Now, the LFCC and any federal employees that they may deputize to serve on the eligibility committee, they are the ones that are actually doing the official review of the nonprofit CFC applications. And are you doing it, Curtis, again, the CFC application review, how to do that? So Curtis is going to be instructing you in very minute detail on how to review a CFC application. So I'm going to leave that to him. But as a PCFO, in most cases, what we're doing is a completeness review. So as charity applications come in, we have a little checklist that's not the official review checklist, but it's a completeness review checklist, just to make sure that all the components of the application are there and complete. So we're checking for things like, did they sign their 990? Did they include all of the attachments that were necessary? Did they check at least one box for every 13 of the checklist items that are on the application? We're there to make sure that the charity has done its due diligence before turning the application over for official review by the LFCC member. And that's an important function because if you haven't experienced this already, you're going to find that there is a large error rate on those applications. And it seems like no matter how much training we give the nonprofits and how many step-by-step instructions that we provide to them, you're going to miss something, especially if they're new to the application process. And I feel like our job is to help these charities be successful, help give them the greatest possible opportunity to be compliant and to be admitted into the CFC. So we're pre-screening for completeness. We are conducting training, so our job is not to make the ask. That is the federal employee's job. But our job is to go into the workplace and to hold training meetings so that federal agencies can come to those meetings and the volunteers, the coordinators, and the key workers can be instructed on best practices for making the ask in the workplace. And part of that job is to make sure that they understand the regulations and that they are asking, in an appropriate manner. So when it says campaign oversight and reporting, the LFCC has ultimate oversight, but we're also tasked with making sure that things are being done according to the regs. And reporting is not, we report to the LFCC, but we are, so that's what we're talking about here, is making sure the LFCC is kept abreast of what's happening in the campaign, how are we doing, and at the end of the campaign, giving a full detailed report on the results of the campaign, that we came in under budget as expected, and that we did indeed meet the regulations that we're required to meet. So as part of the annual audit, it's not just the CPA coming in and looking at the books and looking at the pledge forms. It's a member of the LFCC coming in and reviewing us to make sure that we produce the charity list in accordance with the regs, that we produce the pledge form in accordance with the model pledge form issued annually by OPM, and then other steps that I won't go through now, but it's a step-by-step process to make sure that we are doing our due diligence. So we serve also as the fiscal agent for the campaign. And this is a great, as Catherine mentioned, it's kind of a symbiotic relationship between the PCFO and federal employees at large, because by virtue of the PCFO, which holds a nonprofit 501c3, your gifts through the CFC are tax deductible, because those monies flow through the PCFO to the agencies, when I say agencies, to the nonprofit organizations that you designate. So the PCFO sort of provides its nonprofit status to the campaign, making your contributions tax deductible. And then, of course, we're there to honor those designations exactly as designated by federal employees. We're there to ensure that the campaign is in full compliance and to be as transparent as possible to the donor as to how the campaign operates and how the money flows. And that's one reason we put together that video the other year to try to help explain and demystify the CFC, because as Catherine mentioned, there are too many people out there who still think this is a United Way campaign or a community health charities campaign, or who don't understand A to Z how their money gets from payroll deduction to the charities. I still have a lot of federal employees who call me up and want to know if their payroll center is sending the money to the charities. Well, that's not how it happens. I don't think that's how we want it to happen, frankly. And then finally, we're submitting to the annual financial audit and all the compliance reports that are associated with that. So that's, in a nutshell, the short list of our duties, but I'm going to take you through these in a little bit more deal. So the real deal on PCFO. So in a lot of cases, we're the full-time operators of the campaign, but this of course is going to depend on your size. So if you're a large campaign, hopefully you've got one or two PCFO personnel, dedicated to the campaign. But that's not the case in smaller campaigns. It could be, this could be one of many duties that you have. So it's really important that we're collaborating, because as a PCFO, we have a lot of bosses, of constituents. We have to report to the LFCC. We have to report and respond to OPM. We have federal executive boards or FEAs, or in my case, I don't have either. So I'm reporting a lot to my LFCC and to the heads of local federal agencies. So we interface with federal agencies and the volunteers from those agencies, and also we are interfacing with the nonprofit organizations, and not to be overlooked, our own internal PCFO leadership. So, when someone asks me, who do you report to? I'm going to tell them to sit down and get ready for a long list, because I've got a lot of bosses. Now, in this conference, you're going to hear a ton of great ideas for running and administering the campaign. And really, what you get out of this conference is going to depend in large measure on what you put into it. Incidentally, before this meeting started, there was an email in my inbox that informed me that today is National Make a Friend Day. So I thought, how appropriate for where we are today. So if you're sitting at a table by yourself, scoot in and make a friend with somebody else, because that is really where you're going to learn some of the best practices for running the campaign, is in talking with your colleagues here. So, and if you're shy, approach me after the meeting, and I'll do whatever I can to help.
You'll be their friend? Yeah,
I'll be your friend. And I remember what it was like being the new, doesn't seem really all that long ago, I was the new CFC director sitting out in the audience and wondering what the heck I was doing. So when I say follow the KISS principle, you all know what KISS stands for, right, in this case? Someone shouted out. Keep it simple, stupid. Okay, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't innovate. You should, but it means that there is a basic procedure for operating the campaign, and don't deviate too much from that. So definitely network and find some best practices and some good ideas, but do keep it simple, because at the end of the day, as Charlie Carey likes to say, CFC is a contact sport. You've got to, the fundamentals, if I'm going to draw a football analogy, the fundamental blocking and tackling of the campaign is making sure that you've got great volunteers out there who are in the trenches doing a one-on-one, face-to-face ask. And so any other ideas or marketing things that you come up with are ancillary, are extraneous to that. You need to be focusing on how are you going to get the best people in the trenches making a one-on-one ask of federal employees, because that's the key. There's no other method, and survey results show every single year the number one reason people do not give is that they were never asked to give. And nothing makes my blood boil than when I get an email from a federal employee saying, when is the campaign? And it's January 2nd. And they're telling me, nobody ever came by and asked me, and so I forgot to make my pledge. And this is a person who every single year makes their pledge, but they're busy. They're federal employees. This is not something that they're automatically, as well-intentioned as we are as human beings, we need a reminder. That's why we have smartphones, right? To ding and tell us that, oh, it's time to go to the meeting, stupid, or it's time to wake up, or I wouldn't be here right now. There are some, there is some, also you need to know as a PCFO, there is some risk and liability involved in the campaign. So, we, for example, we're tasked with with producing the annual CFC charity list exactly as provided to us by OPM for the national and international list, and also however many hundreds of local charities that you have. You need to make sure they're all listed on that campaign brochure, because if you leave one out, whether it's by accident or not, you may be responsible if that charity finds out, or when it comes to light, and it will, that you left a charity off the list. You are then responsible to reproduce that list at your own cost. So if you've already printed 20,000 brochures and you left the charity off that list, the CFC is not going to reimburse you for another 20,000 copies of the correct brochure to be printed. The PCFO is going to have to pay for that, and that's something that you sign up for when you agree to be the PCFO. So there's some risk involved. You're liable for mishandling a pledge form or inadvertently sending money to the wrong organization. So you do need to be careful. You do need to make sure that you have the right resources in place and the right infrastructure in place to help ensure that those things don't happen. But as long as I'm talking about risk and liability, let me stress that when the list comes back from OPM saying, here's your final list, you're going over that list with a fine-tooth comb, making sure that every charity is on that list and that they have the correct 5-digit code associated with that name. I don't want to get into horror stories, but I've heard a few, and I've experienced one that was not fun. But these things happen, so be very, very careful. Okay, so having scared you, let's move on to, the campaign team. So I'm just going to walk you through what the members of the campaign team. So your campaign chair is a federal agency head designated to lead and support the annual campaign effort. So what we're talking about here in most cases is the LFCC chair. Now, whether you're like us and the chair of your campaign has an annual rotating cycle, or whether it's the same person year after year, it's generally the chairman of your local federal coordinating committee who helps lead and support the annual campaign effort and is ultimately the person that you report to, and is the person that OPM has on their list of contacts to get updates and guidance on the campaign.
Bruce, if I can just chime in, we've been doing more co-chairs the last few years, and that's really been effective just because that spreads the burden. So that's something to keep in mind. If you can't find one person to commit to it, maybe you can find a team to agree to co-chair the LFCC.
Definitely. And another good practice with that is to have a vice chair that maybe they're shadowing the chair for a year, so that when the time comes for them to take over the following year, they've got that year's worth of experience under the belt, and they come in kind of knowing what's going on. So that's what we've been trying to do the past several years. Then there are loaned executives, and if you've done workplace giving campaigns before, this may be something you're familiar with, but the regs authorize federal employees to serve as a loaned executive, meaning that they are on loan for a short period of time from their federal agency to come and assist you with the campaign. And what we do in our campaign is we had about, in my area, we had 5 or 6 loaned executives last year, and they come to my office, and I give them, first of all, we take them around and we introduce them to many of our local nonprofit organizations. We take them on a tour, and that helps to get them in the spirit of the CFC, get them fired up, to really show them what the campaign is ultimately all about. And then we spend another full day training them on their assignment. So we give each of those London executives an account of a specified number of federal agencies that they then are responsible to go make contact with. They go meet with the federal agency head one-on-one to enlist their support for the campaign. They meet with that federal agency's campaign coordinator for the upcoming year, help to train them on their responsibilities, and to let them know essentially that they are a resource to that person. So when they have questions, when they need supplies or materials, that they are the point person for that federal agency to follow up with. So it will really depend on your LFCC, how much time they are allotted to serve on the campaign, whether you have space at your office for them to come work out of your office, or whether they're working from home or have designated time set aside at their office. That really varies a lot, I find, between from campaign to campaign. Some campaigns are fortunate and they have loaned executives that are completely released from their other duties, and they work out of the PCFO's office for a period of 3 or 4 months during the entire campaign. That's wonderful. It seems to be the exception more than the rule lately, with tightening budgets and with fewer workers available. What we have in our campaign is really loaned executives who are just working flexibly. They're still at their own offices, and they take an hour here or there, with permission from their boss to spend on the campaign, and then they're going out and making those contacts and making those visits. So however
Bruce,
you do it. Yeah,
sorry. As I was sitting here, I was thinking we should have had a slide called "The Real Deal on Loaned Executives,"
probably.
Because there is definitely a downward trend, and it's getting, with agencies again being strapped for resources, it's getting harder and harder to get them to free up an employee to come be a loaned executive. And I know my experience is we used to have a campaign that was 1 county, and we used to get 13 loaned executives. Now we have a campaign that's 6 counties, and I think we got 2. So it's really requiring a lot of creativity on both the PCFO and the LFCC in making that work. One way to be successful is to pitch the opportunity as a career development opportunity, or it's kind of like free training, because agencies have no training budget. So if you're asked for, the loaned executive says something like, here's an opportunity for you to, do some retention training or free training, or, your employee is going to come back to you energized with public speaking skills and a whole network of contacts. Or if you could maybe give them the accounts so that it's maybe agencies they need to learn about or network with anyway, so that there's some job-related benefits to the time they're spent as a loaned executive. The part-time is definitely something we've had to implement. It's hard to do part-time loaned executive because, as you know, if you've got your day job and then you've got your collateral duty, your day job's going to take priority. So it's a tough retraining, thinking how are we going to do the combined federal campaign without this cadre of loaned executives that we've come to rely on. So thinking creatively, but making the pitch to the federal agency and what's in it for them, and how can this be a growth opportunity has helped some. But again, we're still not getting the numbers that, even with our wonderfully well-written loaned executive recruitment letter, we're still not getting the numbers that we need. So that's a real challenge.
It's helpful to also have a loaned executive job description, so it spells out exactly, and it's probably part of the recruitment letter that Catherine was talking about, but it spells out exactly what their duties will be, but not only that, it's the benefits that that person will get. Some of our federal agencies have gotten a little hung up on the term executive. So they tend to think, oh, so this needs to be a GS-13 or higher. No, that's not the case. It's just a term that came from somewhere, but it's really my number one criteria for a loaned executive is are they competent, and do they have the passion for the CFC? If they have those 2 things, I can help them with the other skills needed. But if they're a competent person and they are going to follow through, and they have some passion for nonprofit giving, then that's exactly what I'm looking for. So you are going to have to be flexible. And when I first approached our LFCC, because we hadn't historically had loaned executives before I came on board, when I approached them on the idea, the only way we made it fly was to say we're going to be flexible and we're not going to require that they come and work out of our office full time. They still are your employee. Can they work? Can you give them, half a day here or a day there? even an hour or two off so that they can help us work the phones and follow through. And presented in that fashion, our LFCC approved it, and they were the ones who then went out and found them for me. So that was great. Coordinators are so key to the campaign. When I say coordinator, I mean the person at each federal agency who is tasked with overseeing the CFC at their federal agency. So the person that is going to go out and recruit key workers to assist them, they're going to go and talk with their agency head and secure that person's support for the campaign, and they're the ones who are going to oversee the operations of the campaign within their federal agency. Now, it's your job as the PCFO to train those people, but they and their key workers are the boots on the ground. They're the ones that are in the office, doing the activities, doing the CFC rallies or kickoffs or whatever they're doing at their federal agency to launch the campaign, and most importantly, they're the ones making the ask of the federal employees. So the key workers then report to the coordinator, and this is really going to depend on the size of the federal agency. And if you're like our campaign, you've got federal agencies that are as large as 17,000 right on down to an office of 2 or 1. So the coordinator at the 5-person office isn't going to need 2 key workers. They can follow up and do all the ask themselves. But my campaign chair at Hill Air Force Base has 17,000 federal employees that he's responsible to reach out to. So he's got an entire Army, or I should say Air Force of what they call unit project officers to oversee each unit, which at Hill Air Force Base is as large or larger than most of our other federal agencies, and then a whole hundreds of key workers underneath them that are assigned to make the ask. Now, what we shoot for, and it's not always attainable, but what we try to do is 1 key worker per every 25 employees, because when you have that, and I heard Demetrius say this the other day, then if you have 3 weeks to campaign and they have 25 people they're responsible to ask, you can ask 1 person in the morning, 1 person in the afternoon, and by the end of the 3 weeks, you've made your 100% contact, and you've spent quality time with each person that you're following up with. So really, the more people that you can get on the ground, the more successful you will be. And also, when you're soliciting for a coordinator every year, I have found personally that the number 1 difference in an agency, how well they do in the campaign from year to year, depends on the quality of person that they get to be the coordinator for that year. About 4 years ago, our VA Medical Center in Salt Lake City, in the course of 2 years, they went from raising $40,000 to over $100,000. And the key was, 1 year, they got a really dynamic person to serve as the CFC coordinator, and that person just caught fire. And she raised the campaign single-handedly from $40,000 to $60,000, and then turned it over. She made sure that the next person was equally as passionate, and the next year, it just snowballed. So it went from, and when all was said and done, 4 years later, they raised $121,000. So, and they went from bare bones, bare minimum in the campaign to suddenly they had some of the most fun, creative, exciting activities and events planned for their campaign that if I were to tell you about it, it wowed me when they invited me to the event. I couldn't believe all the resources that they had put into this event, and it was so successful. And their employees were so jazzed, and their boss, their executive director of that hospital, happened to serve as LFCC chair in 2011, and he told me what a difference it had made for the morale, at his federal agency. And it has now become part of their culture, and they're disappointed if they don't win the best overall campaign award in our campaign each and every year, and the Spirit Award too. They didn't win it one year, And they came back. Okay, so I got to take a break and tell you about our Spirit Award. When we have our award ceremony at the end of the year, we encourage our attendees to get rowdy, and we provide noisemakers for them so they can do that. And so the federal agency that shows up and is the rowdiest and makes the most noise and celebrates the most gets the Spirit Award, which is a great big megaphone with a sticker on it, and for each theme of our campaign that year. And so the first 2 years we had that award, the VA hospital won it, until the 1 year when Hill Air Force Base hosted the ceremony, and they brought in the big dogs. They got a guy dressing up as a missile and another guy dressing up as a Minuteman, and they were running around the room. And the guy had his huge noisemaker. It was like this thing that you crank around and around, and it was so noisy and crazy. Cool. And the VA was livid. They were so mad that they had not won the Spirit Award, and they insisted on hosting it themselves the next year. So they had the home turf advantage, and the things that they did were just crazy. They had people like walking up and down the aisles with signs saying applause. I mean, it was wild and so much fun. So I got off on a tangent there. I'm sorry. But I just wanted to kind of show you the difference, illustrate for you the difference that it all started because one person caught fire. So try to find that person. Okay, the part of your campaign team then are your local, national, and international nonprofit organizations. And these are vetted, as we said, annually by federal employees. And it's your job, PCFOs, to make sure they're informed on the regulations. They need to know that they can't go just knocking on the door of a federal agency to make the ask. They need to be invited in as part of a kickoff event or something of that nature. They need to know about the directives, the trends, the future of the CFC. They need to know and make sure to remind them, you've got to apply every year, because it seems like inevitably every year I've got an agency that calls me up and says, why am I not on the list this year? I thought that I applied 2 years ago and I was accepted. And we try to, and it just blows my mind because we do everything possible to make sure they know that you've got to apply each and every year. And we send them reminder emails too, so I'm not sure what happens. But you're responsible to make sure that they receive a designation report, and I believe the deadline for that is usually mid-March of every year. They need to know how much money they were pledged from the campaign, and also at the same time you need to release to them the names and contact information of any donors who authorized you to do so, and no more. No donors that do not authorize you can be released to charities. I also want you to think of the nonprofit organizations as your campaign partners. The more you can kind of deputize them and list them to be your partners in running the campaign, the more successful you will be. So there's nothing in the regulations that prohibits a charity from talking out about the fact that they are a CFC-approved nonprofit organization. So they can use their own website, they can use their own brochures and marketing materials to talk about and communicate the fact that they are a CFC charity. And I encourage them, if you do an annual report, put a thank you in for the combined federal campaign. We provide to them little vinyl stickers that they can put in their office window saying CFC approved charity. The OPM even provided a logo that has the CFC logo and it says approved charity underneath. So we provide that to them because we want, when people come in the door, if they happen to be a federal employee, we want them to be visually cued and reminded, oh yeah, this is a nonprofit in my community that I can support through the combined federal campaign. So what we provide to our charities is a one-pager that is titled, How Can I Maximize My CFC Contribution? And it gives them lists of do's and don'ts. Things you can't do in the campaign, but ways especially that you can trump up the fact that you are a CFC-approved nonprofit organization. So if you are having a CFC event, you can invite your charities into that event. Now, what you have to be careful because you have to make sure that the opportunity is open for all. So when you invite nonprofits to a CFC event, the best way to do it, in my opinion, is to you blast out the invitation to all charities, and you have to include national and international on that list as well. So a lot of them do have local reps. So at the same time, and you basically say we've got space for 50 or however many, first come, first served. And that I believe is just the best way to go about that. But just to illustrate that, this past year, we were misfortunate enough to schedule our kickoff event for October 2nd. And in case you've forgotten, what happened on October 1st? Shut down. So we had a quick decision to make. We realized if we went forward with this event, we would have a grand total of 5 people in the room, which would probably be the kickoff committee. So we scuttled it and instead rescheduled it for a future date at which point the government would be back open. Luckily, 15 days or so later, we reopened, and so we rescheduled our event for October the 28th, I believe, and we called it instead the CFC Halftime Show because it was no longer a kickoff. So, but we were able to use a lot of the same plans we had in place. We just quickly communicated with everybody, and I was pleasantly surprised at the turnout, given the short notice and the morale that we were dealing with, you know, as they're coming back on the job. But we had the CFC Halftime Show, and we had 50 nonprofit organizations attend that event, and they were the entertainment. What we did is we called them up on stage one at a time, and we had what we called the charity popcorn event. And this was an event where, like popcorn, they had 30 seconds to quickly pop off what their, who they were and why you as a federal employee should consider giving to that organization. And we borrowed a gong from a local high school band, and we had people there ready with a timer, and as soon as 30 seconds hit, they gonged. And the noise was deafening, and so you couldn't speak anymore, and besides, we shut off their mic. So it was a lot of fun. We had the local anchor of Fox 13 News who donated his time to come, and he emceed that event, and they were just lined up, ready to go, and they had their uniforms on, and they had props, and they had all kinds of great creative ways to explain who they are and what they did, and there was a lot of laughing and a lot of fun. And I can't take credit for that idea because I stole it from another director who stole it from somebody else who networked at a conference like this to, where those kind of ideas are being shared. But those are the sorts of things that can make a difference in the campaign. So I'm just using that example to illustrate how your nonprofit organizations can be your partner to help market and get some excitement going about the CFC. So get those charities at your events. Use them as speakers to come in. Charity fairs, all kinds of ways that they can get involved in the campaign.
So Bruce, should we take a break before we start with this schedule?
Do. My voice is getting tired.
Yeah.
So let's go 10 minutes?
Because you still got a lot of talking to do.
Yeah, I do. Okay, 10-minute break, everybody, and then we'll reconvene. Thank you.